If you look in history, during World War II, every nation tried to push its own world to the edge. Many countries made warships and every type of weapon imaginable. Among these, Canadian warships earned their own reputation across the seas. Their build, endurance, and power allowed them to command the ocean, becoming known as Atlantic hunters. We've listed every Canadian warship used in World War II for you, so stay with us till the end, because every vessel carried its own purpose and strategy. Well, let's talk about HMCS Haida. Some warships earn respect, others build legends. HMCS Haida did both. Constructed by Vickers Armstrongs in Newcastle upon Tyne, she was ordered in 1940, launched on August 25, 1942, and commissioned into service on August 30, 1943. With a standard displacement hovering between 1,391 and 1,659 tons and a top speed pushing 36 knots, Haida wasn't built for quiet patrols. She was built to fight. Her heavy gun armament made her feel closer to a small cruiser than a typical destroyer, designed for surface combat as much as convoy defense. Most of her war unfolded in the English Channel and Bay of Biscay, where she hunted German destroyers, escorts, and patrol craft. Night battles, interception missions, and relentless pressure defined her service. By war's end, Haida had earned recognition as the most successful fighting ship in Canadian naval history. Today, she still exists, not in memory, but in steel. Preserved as a museum ship, carrying her scars forward. HMCS Huron Speed shaped everything about HMCS Huron, G-24. Built as a tribal-class destroyer, Huron carried the traits of an attack ship: high speed, powerful artillery, and radar systems meant for night combat. After D-Day, her work shifted heavily into the English Channel, where German coastal traffic still threatened Allied supply lines. There, Huron took on interception duties, escort missions, and aggressive surface patrols, often operating in darkness, where radar and nerve mattered more than numbers. Her role wasn't passive protection, it was active disruption. Laid down on July 15, 1941, launched on June 25, 1942, and commissioned on July 28, 1943, she entered the war when the Atlantic fight had turned vicious and precise. She hunted enemy vessels, screened Allied movements, and struck where German escorts still tried to survive. Huron's career reflects the late-war reality of the Atlantic, no longer just convoy lanes, but contested coastal battlegrounds where destroyers became roaming weapons. HMCS Athabascan. There's a reason Athabascan's name still carries weight. Her operations stretched across the North Atlantic and into the English Channel, where Allied destroyers increasingly clashed with German surface forces. Launched on November 15, 1941, and commissioned on February 3, 1943, she entered service as another tribal-class destroyer built for speed, reach, and surface combat. That danger became real on the night of April 29, 1944. While operating in the Channel, Athabascan, G-07, was struck by a torpedo fired by the German destroyer T-24 during a chaotic night engagement. As she lay crippled, U-454 delivered the final blow. The ship was lost, and with her, a heavy toll of crew. Athabascan's sinking wasn't a convoy ambush, it was surface warfare at close range, fast, violent, and unforgiving. Her destruction became one of the Royal Canadian Navy's most remembered combat losses, symbolizing how destroyer warfare had shifted into deadly, face-to-face encounters. HMCS Iroquois HMCS. Iroquois didn't ease into war, she stepped straight into it. Early assignments sent her far from home waters, including Mediterranean operations and dangerous Arctic convoy routes, where survival depended as much on hull strength as on enemy awareness. Later, her focus shifted back toward Western Europe. Iroquois supported operations surrounding the Normandy landings, conducting escort work, patrols, and surface missions in heavily contested seas. Commissioned on November 30, 1942, she became the first tribal-class destroyer in active Royal Canadian Navy service. Built as a destroyer leader, she often worked at the center of formations, coordinating movement and protection. After Germany's collapse, her duties didn't end. Iroquois took part in post-surrender escort operations, including assignments tied to captured German ships. Her service path reflects the full arc of the Canadian Destroyer War, from frozen convoys to invasion waters to the quiet, uneasy responsibilities that followed victory. HMCS Ottawa Long, before the Atlantic turned into a killing ground, this ship was already waiting. Originally HMS Crusader, she transferred to Canada and was commissioned into the Royal Canadian Navy on June 15, 1938, making her one of the Navy's pre-war destroyers. When hostilities erupted, Ottawa was pushed straight into a convoy escort service, guarding merchant lines that became prime targets for German submarines. She spent years running those routes, aging hardware pressed into modern war. That pressure ended on September 14, 1942. While escorting convoy on 127, Ottawa, H-60, was struck by torpedoes fired from U-91. The damage was fatal. She went down in the North Atlantic, another destroyer consumed by the U-boat campaign. Ottawa's loss shows how the Battle of the Atlantic wasn't fought only by new warships. Older hulls were worked, repaired, and sent back out until the sea finally claimed them. Well, now let's move to HMCS Micmac. Before Micmac ever touched open water, she was already a symbol. Built at Halifax shipyards, she represented Canada, no longer just operating warships, but producing them. Her keel went down on May 20, 1942. She was launched on September 18, 1943, and after long fitting-out delays, commissioned on September 18, 1945. By then, the shooting war had ended, yet Micmac still stands as a wartime ship in every meaningful sense. Her construction alone tells that story. With a reported cost of $8.5 million Canadian dollars, she embodied the industrial scale Canada reached during the conflict. Designed as a tribal-class destroyer, Micmac carried the same aggressive blueprint: high speed, heavy guns, and fleet-level combat capability. Though she never fired shots in WWII, her existence reflects how the Atlantic War forced Canada to transform from a small naval power into a nation capable of producing modern frontline destroyers on its own soil. HMCS Sackville. Nothing about Sackville suggested glory at first glance. Small hull, short range, modest speed, but war has a habit of turning the ordinary into the essential. Built at St. John Shipbuilding, she was laid down on May 28, 1940, launched on May 15, 1941, and commissioned on December 30, 1941. Displacing about 950 tons and making roughly 16 knots, Sackville belonged to the Flower-class corvettes, the backbone of Allied convoy escort. Her world was the North Atlantic: cold decks, endless crossings, constant submarine alarms. Over time, she was upgraded with radar, Hedgehog mortars, and improved anti-aircraft weapons, adapting as the threat evolved. Sackville's duty was never to hunt headlines. It was to stay with the convoys, mile after mile, storm after storm. Today, she remains preserved as Canada's official naval memorial ship, carrying the physical memory of the escort war that kept the Atlantic lifeline alive. HMCS Snowberry's service began before Canada officially took her in. She was commissioned on November 26, 1940, then formally transferred and commissioned into the Royal Canadian Navy on May 15, 1941. From that point on, she became exactly what the Atlantic War demanded: persistent. As a Flower-class corvette, Snowberry was designed for rapid construction, not comfort. Her missions centered on convoy escort duty, guarding merchant shipping across submarine-infested waters. Throughout the war, she underwent repeated refits, receiving improved radar systems, Hedgehog anti-submarine mortars, and stronger anti-aircraft defenses. Each upgrade reflected how quickly the Battle of the Atlantic evolved. Snowberry's identity wasn't tied to one famous battle. It was shaped by repetition: crossings, contacts, alarms, rescues, returns. She belonged to the class of ships that never left the sea quiet, forcing German U-boats to fight for every mile of ocean they tried to claim. HMCS Chambly. When Chambly entered service, Canada was still learning how to fight a naval war. Ordered from Canadian Vickers, she was laid down on February 20, 1940, launched on July 29, 1940, and commissioned on December 18, 1940. Early in the conflict, corvettes like Chambly became test platforms for Canadian escort tactics. She went on to participate in several confirmed anti-submarine actions, gaining recognition for her role in early convoy defense and U-boat engagements. Chambly also took part in numerous rescues of survivors, a reality inseparable from Atlantic operations. Her career reflects the transition of the Royal Canadian Navy, from an inexperienced escort force to a coordinated anti-submarine service. In a war often remembered for massive fleets, Chambly stands for the quieter turning point, the moment when Canada's small escort ships began to win encounters instead of merely enduring them. All right, now let's jump to HMCS Swansea. By the time Swansea was built, corvettes alone were no longer enough. She was laid down on July 15, 1942, launched on December 19, 1942, and commissioned on October 4, 1943, as a River-class frigate, a design created to fix the escort fleet's weaknesses. Swansea carried a greater range, better seakeeping, improved crew conditions, and more advanced sonar and radar equipment. Her weapons suite included Hedgehog mortars and depth charges, turning her into a dedicated submarine hunter rather than a simple convoy guard. These frigates were meant to stay at sea longer, search wider areas, and pursue contacts instead of losing them. Swansea's presence reflects a strategic shift. The Atlantic War was no longer just about surviving attacks. It had become about systematically dismantling the underwater threat that once ruled the convoy routes. HMCS Waskesiu. Unlike many ships that entered service quietly, HMCS Waskesiu arrived as part of a turning point. She was laid down on May 2, 1942, launched on April 3, 1943, and commissioned on June 16, 1943, becoming one of the first River-class frigates constructed in Canada and commissioned into the Royal Canadian Navy. That fact alone gave her symbolic weight. The River-class design existed because corvettes had shown their limits. Waskesiu carried greater operational range, stronger endurance, and far more capable detection equipment. Her decks were fitted with modern sonar, surface search radar, Hedgehog anti-submarine mortars, and depth charges, shifting her identity from convoy companion to active submarine hunter. With a speed of roughly 20 knots, she was built to stay with contacts instead of losing them in rough water. Waskesiu's war unfolded in escort and patrol roles where patience mattered as much as aggression. Long stretches at sea, constant scanning, and sudden bursts of violence defined her service. She belonged to the generation of Canadian warships that didn't simply react to the Atlantic threat. They were built specifically to erase it. HMCS Stormont's story bends in a way few warships ever do. Structurally, she was a river-class frigate through and through, longer hull, extended range, improved crew quarters, and escort endurance designed for the open Atlantic. During the war, Stormont served in Atlantic escort operations and later took part in duties connected to Normandy in 1944, supporting Allied naval activity during the invasion period. Her role placed her in waters where escort ships weren't just protecting convoys anymore. They were guarding troop movements, supply corridors, and invasion routes. After the war, Stormont left military life behind and eventually became the luxury yacht Christina, owned by Aristotle Onassis. That transformation is famous. Built by Canadian Vickers in Montreal, she was launched on July 14, 1943, and commissioned on November 27, 1943. But during WWII, there was nothing glamorous about her existence. HMCS Red Deer. Not every warship hunted submarines or chased destroyers. HMCS Red Deer belonged to that quieter, more dangerous category. She was laid down in January 1941, launched on October 5, 1941, and commissioned on November 24, 1941, as a Bangor-class minesweeper. Officially, her job focused on minesweeping and local defense, but the reality of Canada's naval war often blurred lines. Red Deer also conducted escort and patrol duties, especially during the tense period associated with the Battle of the St. Lawrence, when German U-boats carried the war directly to Canadian coastal waters. Bangor-class ships were smaller and more lightly armed than destroyers or frigates, yet they worked inside confined, vulnerable zones where a single hidden mine could erase a ship in seconds. Red Deer's presence in Thames waters represented a different form of Atlantic warfare, not chasing enemies across oceans, but stripping danger from harbors, approaches, and shipping lanes so the rest of the fleet could move at all. HMCS Prince Robert. Prince Robert began her war life wearing a disguise. Early conversion work, often cited at around $755,000 Canadian dollars, restructured her for escort and patrol duties. But this was only her first transformation. By 1943, Prince Robert underwent a far more serious rebuild, emerging as a dedicated anti-aircraft cruiser. Her silhouette, armament, and internal layout were reshaped around air defense. In this new role, she served on convoy escort assignments, where aircraft posed an increasing threat, and later deployed into the Pacific theater as the war expanded. Originally built as a passenger liner, she was taken over and converted into an armed merchant cruiser in 1940. After Japan's surrender, Prince Robert's work didn't end with combat. She became involved in post-war transport and repatriation duties, helping move personnel in the unstable aftermath of victory. Prince Robert's career shows how adaptable Canada's naval assets had to be. Ships rebuilt, rearmed, and reassigned as the nature of war kept shifting. HMCS Uganda wasn't subtle. She was weight, steel, and reach. As a Crown Colony-class light cruiser, Uganda brought cruiser-grade armor, heavy guns, layered anti-aircraft defenses, and long-range operational capacity. After joining Canada, she was assigned to the British Pacific Fleet in 1945, where her missions included shore bombardment and carrier screening. This placed her in a different kind of naval war, supporting fast carrier groups, defending against air attack, and projecting firepower onto enemy-held territory. Launched on August 7, 1941, Commissioned on January 3, 1943, as HMS Uganda and transferred to Canada on October 21, 1944, she became HMCS Uganda, one of the largest and most powerful warships ever to serve under the Royal Canadian Navy during the war. Uganda's service signaled Canada's arrival not only as an Atlantic escort power, but as a navy capable of operating capital ships within a global fleet structure. So, that's all for today. We hope you enjoyed the video, so press the like button and don't forget to subscribe for future updates. Thanks for watching and hanging with us.